And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on Friday, August 22nd, 2025. And this weekend we have a pretty potent system that's going to include an atmospheric river coming in all the way down in the tropical Pacific, coming up across the Bering Sea and then pushing into the interior of the state going through Saturday and Sunday. This system will be a wet one. Areas of the south, though south central along the Gulf Coast Panhandle will enjoy some warm temperatures. Areas that do get sunshine will be in the 70s. But to the west, what we'll watch is Friday night into Saturday morning, low pressure will cross the Gulf of Anadyr and then the Bering Strait with a warm front that pushes in through the west coast into the interior. And this warm front will be accompanied by some breezy conditions and rain. And the rain could be moderate to locally heavy at times, especially any terrain interactions. And as we get up here along north of the Yukon River to the southern slopes of the Brooks Range this weekend, some of the rain, we're looking at 2-3 inches of rainfall. So this will be a very wet system. There could be a few pop-up showers with the warm temperatures over the weekend here in south central around some of the terrain. But otherwise, pretty dry weather. And we start out Saturday, IFR conditions along the south slopes of the Brooks Range, much of the west coast, Waikiki Deltas down and through the entire Aleutian chain. And for Saturday afternoon, again, where there is sunshine here, especially south of the Alaska Range and in through the Panhandle, you're going to enjoy some fine, very warm later summer weather. And across the interior, that moisture is going to be pressing northeastward because that atmospheric river shows up very clearly, in satellite imagery, and where a frontal boundary is going to stall out. We're going to have a front stall out right like this across the interior Saturday into Sunday. So along and north of that frontal boundary is where the steadiest rain will set up with lower ceilings, visibility, and as such. But Saturday afternoon, we find IFR conditions, Beaufort Sea coast, down along North Slope, Brooks Range, Seward Peninsula, extending out across all of the Bering and the Aleutian chain. Some excellent late summer weather, though, where you do get the sunshine. As I said, some of the finest weather you can have for this time of year. And then for Sunday morning, we have areas of IFR along the Brooks Range, south slopes. We also find some here in through the middle upper Yukon Valley and in some of the higher terrain to the northwest there of Fairbanks. Otherwise, widespread IFR around Norton Sound, the lower Yukon Valley and the lower middle Kuskokwim, as well as areas around Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay. And on Sunday afternoon, along and north of that front, this is an area, and I would include there could be some pockets of IFR through this region, but this is where some of the steadier moderate rainfall will occur. It'll be pretty much steady light to moderate rain with occasionally a little heavier rain, where you may have some terrain enhancement, and then IFR extends all the way from the southwest coast back out through especially central and western Aleutian chain. So passes Saturday. I think Anatuvik as well as Adigan up there in the east central Brooks Range will largely stay IFR. And then you get further south, Lake Clark and Merrill, we're looking at VFR conditions. And as we round the entire Alaska Range, Rainy Pass, Windy Pass, going on up through Isabel and Mentasta passes, all VFR, and in through the Copper River Basin. Tanita Pass, also VFR conditions expected, as well as at Portage Pass, further east across Yakutat to Chilkoot and White, and much of the Panhandle enjoying VFR conditions this weekend. And again, if you get a fair amount of sun and you're on these locations where you have really clearer skies, you're going to see temperatures quite warm, 60s and 70s very easily. And looking at the freezing levels, when you get these freezing levels, they come upward with distance here. We have freezing levels above 12,000 feet over the southwest mainland, and then coming back down toward the eastern half of the Aleutians. Freezing levels aloft up to 4,000 feet. That implies a warm air mass, and it's a warm and moist one at that. The atmospheric river running right along this axis of warm, moist air coming right up on into the interior as we go through Saturday and Sunday, where you see the packing of these isotherms, so to speak, freezing levels. That implies a frontal boundary, cooler temperatures along the Arctic coast, not really cold, but cooler. And then here we have a little lower freezing levels south of the Gulf. This is where that weakening upper level low is, but it's far enough south that The Gulf Coast, south central, southeast interior, and through much of the Panhandle should see quite a bit of sunshine and warmer temperatures through the weekend. Now, where the moisture, we have thicker clouds, thicker moisture to deal with, and these clouds are producing rain. And we find that where we have that occurring, you're going to have a better chance of moderate icing, but quite high up, above 10, 12,000 feet across the Brooks Range, and then back through the southwest above 14,000 feet because this is such a warm and moist air mass. And then you get back out here down across the lower half of the Bering Sea and out through the western Aleutians, you're going to have icing above 16,000 feet. And here we have the one circulation with the weakening low that's in the North Pacific south of the Gulf, not really a big player. But look at the winds. We have kind of two belts of winds in the upper level jet stream, 30,000 feet. There's a belt of west-northwest winds across the northern mainland. That kind of is associated with the trough up there at the Arctic Ocean. And then back here, this is the one out over the central Bering Sea with a jet max of 115 knots. These southwesterly winds are helping at lower levels to transport all of that moisture. And then we can clearly see mid-levels, 9,000 feet, 700 millibars. This is the atmospheric river, at least the wind signature that's transporting all of that tropical moisture from the North Pacific up across the Bering Sea and then pushing it into the interior of the mainland. And the winds aloft are quite strong across Yukon Flats, the entire Yukon Valley. We're looking at winds of 50 knots plus. Locally, could be upwards of 65 knots along White Mountains and areas higher terrain just to the northeast of Fairbanks. And if we take it down to 3,000 feet, you can see still that belt of winds along a frontal boundary and also transporting that moisture. And that is generally 40 to locally 50 knot, but solid 40 knot southwesterly winds all the way from south of the Aleutians coming across the Bering into the southwest coast, lower Yukon, right up along the entire Yukon Valley, and especially just on the other side, the north side of the Alaska Range, between the Alaska Range and the Brooks Range. So the threat of turbulence, moderate turbulence, is very likely. Widespread moderate turbulence across much of the interior, north of the Alaska Range to the south and even along the spine of the Brooks Range. Surface to 6,000 feet, not even some eyes as we get into Saturday afternoon, evening. There could even be some pockets of isolated severe turbulence, again, out here through the central, east central interior. Later Saturday, but then that moderate turbulence extends southwestward out through St. Lawrence, St. Matthew, down out through the central Bering, and then covering much of the western Aleutians. So out that way, we're looking at surface to 3,000, surface to 4,000 feet. You could encounter some moderate turbulence on Saturday.